Chris, you're very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. I'm really delighted and thrilled to be speaking with you today.
Thanks, man. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. I open up the podcast with this question to all of our guests, which is a strange question to ask to a former FBI lead investigator, but I'll pose it given that you're now leading the Black Swan Group. Our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Chris, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're trying to amplify how you're making a dent in the universe. Presume that your mission is good, that you're making a difference in people's lives, that you're making people's lives better. And then how do you multiply that without having to do it all yourself? I mean, yeah, you're cloning yourself, and how does that work, and how can you get it out there?
I love that, and you are certainly doing that. I have a copy of your wonderful book, Never Split the Difference, and I would really like us today to do a little mini masterclass on your book. It's contrarian to everything I've ever learned in 25 years in business. So it's a brilliant read. I was sharing with you earlier, 25,000 Amazon reviews, just incredible. So well done.
Yeah, rated a lot of reviews, and they're good reviews too. I mean, it averages up over 4.8 stars. So yeah,
well done.
People that are appreciating and demonstrating their appreciation for it.
Incredible. You open out the book and you cite a landmark case back in 1971, which changed the way American law enforcement engaged in negotiations thereafter. So just to give us a little bit of context in relation to some of the contrarian tactics in the book, can you share with the listeners what that landmark case actually
Well, I think you're referring to the case in Rochester, New York, William Griffith. And, we had been aware, I'm sure it had been happening, but we were told that, hostages weren't killed on deadline. I mean, it was the first day of my training when I went through the FBI Academy. They went through the first day, hostages don't get killed on deadline. And then the very next day, they present us with the William Griffith case, where he says, if you don't kill me at 2:00 in the afternoon, I'm gonna shoot a hostage. And he held true to his word, and they didn't understand the dynamic. And what it really was for us is the recognition, the acceptance that there are some deals that are never going to be made. And, people engage in business negotiations, assuming that the other side genuinely wants to make a deal. And we had to see what the indicators were in law enforcement to realize that, if it sounded like a duck and it quacked like a duck, it wasn't exactly a duck all the time. So what were the differences when somebody's never going to make the deal? How do you recognize that up front and adjust accordingly so it's not disastrous, in a hostage situation? And in point of fact, people are negotiating. The book, and the title of the book is Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It. And business people are negotiating as if their livelihoods depended on it. And knowing when somebody's never going to make the deal with you it's a minority of the time, but it happens enough that it could be damaging for your business.
Yeah, and I'll get into that a little bit, because having negotiated business deals across the globe, we eventually scaled our business to have offices in 6 continents. And what I came to learn in later life is that in Brazil, they never say no. They'll never give you a no. In the States, they will be very straight talking. In Australia, very straight talking. Certain parts of Europe, again, you get a slow no. How do we discern the difference between those who are there to actually do a deal and those who really aren't the decision makers?
Yeah, it's going to be a couple of things. First of all, if they're looking to you for free consulting, or if they're looking to you to be a competing bid, or due diligence, they got to get 3 bids and they need you because, if you don't know who the fool in the game is, it's probably you. People who are overly focused on one particular aspect, your gut instinct is going to let you know that this sounds like I'm being just compared on one dimension here. That's a real good clue. We get calls. People just want to know about our price, nothing else. Price, 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 price.
Yeah.
They get somebody else in mind, and they're just looking at us for a competing bid. Also, when conversely, when people are very vague, they're looking, they're price shopping, they're due diligence, they're unfocused. If you have no prior relationship with them, that is initially not a good sign. Depending upon what they're looking to get from you, people rarely buy something from someone they have no relationship with. The decision-making process for the purchase of a service, purchase of a product, for a business collaboration, that regardless of the decision process in the environment, whether it's business to business or business to consumer, B2B or B2C, you reach out for the person you really want to buy from after you've done all your research. And if you get the feeling from the other side that they're just doing research, then the chances are that's not a real conversation. They're just doing research.
Yeah, I love that, and that resonates so strongly, with my experience over the last 25 years. Something you've mentioned there is rapport, and we'll get into that. Before we leave that, you write the book beautifully. It's so engaging because you open up each of the chapters with a story from that just seems straight out of a film. It's incredible how you open up the chapters and then you relate that to everyday life, and especially from a business perspective. Thankfully in business we'll not be negotiating where lives are at stake, but as you mentioned, livelihoods are at stake. Can you share with us, before we do get into the tactics of effective negotiating, some of the hurriest moments that you have been in where you've felt that you may have lost someone, or some of the most challenging negotiations that you've been in?
Well, one of the cases I talk about, which actually ended up leading me to Harvard, the Burnham Sobrero case in the Philippines. That went really well for us for a while, and then it just turned into this ugly, ugly mess at the end. You learned a lot there. There were different points in time we thought we were doing well, and other points in time that things were just out of control. The governments weren't collaborating. Heck, different agencies within the U.S. government were not collaborating. And it just ended up in a really ugly, ugly outcome. Botched rescue attempt, remaining hostages, 2 out of 3 shot, killed, 1 wounded. And we went back through that. I mean, we realized that we applied everything we did. I did, we did internal review, always worked as a team. You want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go as a team. Got to work as a team. And we went back and decided that we'd done everything we could. And so my thought was, that means we got to get better. So that's when I reached out to Harvard and said, hey, what are you guys talking about? Can we collaborate? Can we see if we're on the same sheet of music, so to speak? Have we got the same ideas? And, I went up and I paid for some training up there. And then we started to collaborate after that. They were very gracious and very open with me.
Yeah, you mentioned at the outset of the book the role play that you were engaged in within Harvard, and there's a line that you cite at the end of that time, that you realized that without a deep understanding of human psychology, without the acceptance that we are all crazy, irrational, impulsive, emotionally driven animals, all the raw intelligence and mathematical logic in the world is little help in the fraught, shifting interplay between two people negotiating. I just find that incredible. Can you share with the listeners what you mean by that, Chris?
Well, everybody makes up their mind about things based on what they care about. So that makes decision-making by definition an emotional process. And as soon as you wrap your mind around that, it's not that people are, rationality is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. So if you don't understand somebody, you just don't agree with their rationality, but very few people are unpredictable. Like there just isn't anybody that's unpredictable unless they're actually, unless they're actually paranoid schizophrenic and they're actually hearing voices in their head or they're seeing things that aren't there. But everybody else is predictable. I mean, pick a politician from a party that you don't like, that drives you crazy. Well, they don't do anything that surprises you. You knew they were going to do that stuff. You knew what they were going to say. You just didn't happen to like it. You didn't agree with it. But people have patterns. So as you first, understanding human nature is what are the basic patterns that everybody's driven by. Understand human nature, then understand the human in front of you. People are driven largely by loss. People are driven by how they see this playing out in the future. People are driven by what they see, how they see this affecting their identity. And Danny Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in 2002 for prospect theory, saying loss thinks twice as much as an equivalent gain. And that's paraphrasing what Kahneman said. Well, if loss thinks twice as much as an equivalent gain, then the single biggest decision-making factor in human existence is what's the loss? Not the only factor, but it's the biggest factor. And then when you start thinking about it in those terms, then people become very predictable.
I've done 50 episodes of the podcast, and there's a revelation in here because lack of ambition of the leader is cited as the single greatest impediment to why only less than 2% of SMEs ever achieve scale. Now, entrepreneurs by their nature don't lack ambition. But what you've just described is that our sense of this is that there's fear there. And the fear is ultimately what you've cited, driven by the potential loss of moving forward rather than staying where they're at, how it might play out in the future given a level of uncertainty, and how it impacts their identity, likely if, should they fail. So you've unraveled something there. How do we turn those things, just as an aside, and take negotiating really here in the largest context of the entrepreneur leader negotiating on their future? We assert that they should all create a vision for the future and lean into that, but there's a level of certainty in that. Given your understanding of the psychology of humans, Chris, can you kind of give us some your sense of this and how we could create more certainty in terms of leaning into that vision, negotiating with the future?
You're very close to the same phrase that we use, vision drives decision. So what's their vision of the future? And then what really is everybody needs a fair amount of maintenance, so to speak, mental hygiene, if you will.
Yeah.
Human beings are by definition, our default wiring is negative. We're pessimistic by definition. And so when we begin to envision the future, we start worrying about failing. We start seeing things go bad, or we get embarrassed if something goes bad. It's my firm belief that the world is largely very supportive. Roughly, there's a 70% chance of success just based on chance as you move forward. If the universe wasn't largely supportive, we wouldn't have survived as a species. But a 70% chance of success still leaves a 30% chance of failure. And that amount of failure scares the heck out of most people. They want to be perfect. They want to never fail. So it's really grasping the fact that there is no guarantee of success. There's only a guarantee of best chance of success. And if you can cross that threshold, which means you're going to fail occasionally, it's going to go bad. But if you're rolling the dice, each failure teaches you, makes you smarter. The great Irish philosopher, Colin McGregor.
Oh, brilliant.
I win or I learn.
Yeah, it's the strap line that we had within the culture of our organization. His trainer, John Kavanagh, wrote a wonderful book as well, with the same title. I love that.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, and then every time you fail, if you learn, well, then you increase your success percentage. Like the world can get to be a very much higher level of success than 70%. You can get very high. You can get hostage negotiators have gotten a 93% success rate. That still means 7% of the time it's going bad. And it loops back onto what we were talking about before. We had to recognize, we call them 7%ers. What's the 7%er look like? And then we just withdraw from that. We, in the business world, I don't even bother. We get a 7%er. If you're looking for a 7%er, their characteristics really start to jump out at you quickly if you're willing to see them.
Like what?
Again, very price focused. Someone who's very price focused is probably not going to make a deal with you. Depending upon the decision you're trying to get somebody to make. Are you the first person they've ever met? If they're doing due diligence, everybody has a favorite. People are gathering information constantly, and everybody has a favorite based on prior relationships or recommendation of a trusted advisor. If you're not being recommended by a trusted advisor, no matter how smart you are, you could be the best in the business. You're not getting the gig. You're not getting the job. And especially if you're best in the business, you by definition are due diligence. When you're really, really good, who else is somebody going to shop features with other than you? They're going to use you all the time. So recognizing the reality of human nature, which is vision drives decision, and people always have favorites, and the favorites are either trusted advisors or recommended by trusted advisors. You start dropping those things into your thinking, and you then avoid the 7%ers.
Yeah, I love that. And it is a nod to a methodology that we talk about in terms of the three overarching functions of a business, winning the business, delivering the business, and ensuring the customer success in the shape of a circle. And we say, if you're world class in each one of those, the customer has never any reason to leave, and you've got a customer for life. So the getting into the tactics, and I love this, you mentioned at the outset the 4 steps of negotiating, essentially active listening, developing our late night DJ voice, mirroring, and then silence. Can you step the listeners through the 4 steps and elaborate on those, Chris?
Well, a lot of it is really, how do you encourage the other person to go first? And, it's not just active listening, it's proactive listening. What are you listening for? You're listening for a number of things. You're listening for what's holding them back. Again, this default wiring that I talked about before, we're largely negative, mental hygiene, if you will. And as for your own best interests, you have to engage on a daily basis in practices and behaviors that put you in a positive frame of mind. Because if you don't, then you're going to lapse back into your default negative wiring. So the first one, which also overlaps very much with your negotiation and customer service and client relations and all that, is just being curious. Like if I'm genuinely curious about what you have to say, where you're coming from, I'm in a positive state of mind. It's impossible to be angry and curious simultaneously. You're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. So if you're curious, you're smarter. You're seeing patterns more quickly. You're taking in more information. You're finding out where the other side is coming from. Now, when you're curious about the person you're talking to, they love it. They want to talk to you.
Yeah.
You're developing rapport. Yeah. They feel very engaged with. They begin to open up with you. And you're doing 2 things at the same time. You're developing rapport, you're gathering information instead of one or the other, which now becomes the accelerator of your business relationship. The only thing that affects deal timelines are business relationships, good or bad. So when you're curious and you're using tactical empathy, you're accelerating the relationship in a very good way. So that's really why you want to hear people out to start out with. And there's a really good chance they're going to give you some really valuable information that you could use if you hear them out first.
And that's asking lots of really good questions, presumably.
And, ask good questions, but you got to actually listen to the answers. and you got to demonstrate that you're actually listening. Like I remember reading an article several years ago, and this is emblematic of all business, but it was a guy in Silicon Valley talking about how much they hated the people from the entertainment industry that would come to see him because they never listened to anything they said. You know, somebody start out with a good question. How are you? What's the biggest challenge you face? What keeps you up at night? Those are all fairly good questions if you listen to the answers. But most people are trained, they'll ask a good open-ended question and immediately proceed with their sales pitch. So they didn't even listen to the answer. You got to actually listen. You know, it's not active listening, it's actually listening.
Yeah. So on that basis, and I've been listening intently, and you've mentioned mental hygiene twice just before we get into the late night DJ voice and the mirroring. You've mentioned mental hygiene twice, and whether I read it in the book or heard you say this at some point, that we look after our dental hygiene, but we don't look after our mental hygiene. You know, what steps, what habits, practices can the listeners embed in their routines to develop a robust kind of mental hygiene?
Yeah, and you know, you brush your teeth every morning and every night. Do I got to brush my teeth today? Because I brushed them yesterday. Well, yeah, and it's, you don't spend an hour brushing your teeth. You know, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, for a few minutes. I mean, that's pretty good practice in and of itself for your mental hygiene. Like I start my day, there's a short music that I listen to that I find, you know, fits my spiritual approach. It's kind of non-denominational. And I do short gratitude exercise. You know, I put it down in a journal. It didn't take that long. It, you know, it doesn't take a lot of time, but I want to get my brain on the right path first thing in the morning. And then, you know, I finish my day with short spiritual exercise. And I got different things that I repeat to myself through the course of the day, try to keep things in perspective, and remind myself that I think the universe is a largely very supportive place. And it's not a lot of work, but it's a small habit. I think it gives me a competitive advantage.
Brilliant. Is this something you learned over the years, or were you doing this, you know, in the heat of some of your most difficult negotiations?
Well, you know, a couple of the habits my parents tried to instill in me. I've been to a couple of Tony Robbins events,
Very good.
and you know, I find him very, you know, very strong spirituality, very non-denominational. I think that's the point of he's trying to appeal to everybody without getting too down into any one particular religion, because he doesn't want people to feel left out. And you know, through the course of, you know, I did unlimited UPW and Lisa Power Within, I think, a couple times. And he just gives you a ton of little habits, you know, whether they be gratitude, whatever they are. And if you can get behind it, you're not going to do a lot. You know, those are great refreshers when you go to them. I'll probably go back again. But you know, I picked up some tiny little habits that I really kind of like from there, and they made me feel good, and I felt energized, and so I repeat them.
Brilliant. So we're coming into the negotiations. We have practices that support good mental hygiene. We're actually listening, not just proactively listening. Share with the listeners what you mean by the late night DJ voice and the importance of this in negotiation.
Yeah, well, you know, your tone of voice when the other person hears it, actually when you hear it, it creates a neurochemical reaction. It's an involuntary reaction. It just happens. If you have a soothing late night FM DJ voice,
you have a wonderful one.
yeah, it has a calming effect on people. It helps level people out.
Yeah,
It's a great tone of voice when you're really firm on a term and an aspect of your business that you're just not going to change. And you need it to stick. You don't want the other person to feel backed into the corner. You don't want to feel accused. You just want them to get it. Like in my company, since we do training, a lot of times where people give us a contract for training and they'll put a work for hire clause in. And we don't do work for hire, that gives up our intellectual property, ownership of it. And if it comes up, I just say we don't do work for hire.
Wow.
And I didn't make you feel backed into a corner on that. But you get the feeling without being accused that it ain't happening. And there's no point in arguing this. It's a way to say take it or leave it without making somebody feel attacked. Because there are some things in your business you got to protect. And these are take it or leave it things. These are, in point of fact, my way or the highway. But you don't want to say it that way because you want the other person to feel good about dealing with you, even if you don't make a deal. Like even the 7%ers, if we can help it, we're still very polite with the 7%ers. We disengage very quickly, but not in an impolite way.
Yeah. Something you did there, you elongated and deliberately slowed down
Right.
how you were saying that, and whether it was deliberate or not, and I assume it was very deliberate, your voice was a notch down. It just so there was nothing. I didn't feel affronted by the fact that you were rejecting that. It was nice and calm. It was the tone was lowered. Is that something that when we're negotiating, we should be very aware of when we talk about tonality, about the the actual whether we're talking loudly or softly, as well as just the general tone?
Yes, absolutely. Your inflection, you can control your inflection, whether it's downward or upward.
Yeah.
Actually, with that, how your chin, if you need to inflect down, and you don't have to be a man to have a late night FM DJ voice. All you got to do is drop your chin when you talk, and it'll take your voice down, male or female. Now, I talked before about curiosity. You bring your chin up when you want to really be interested. That lands in a completely different way. It encourages people.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to encourage somebody in a conversation, get something that you might have to say, if confrontational, which means it has to be said, you're either going to drop your chin and give it with the calming, this is the way it is, or you thought I wasn't serious? Bring your chin up, same way. And when you practice these, and this is all practice, this is all learned. I mean, because human beings are born, you're a blank slate when you're born.
Yes.
Complete blank slate. Regardless of gender, ethnicity, religion, we're pretty much the exact same creature when we come out of the womb. Now, culture gets layered in on top of that. Religion, everything else gets layered in on top of that. So you're blank slate when you're born. You can learn this stuff. Everybody has the ability to learn it. We learn everything we do.
Yeah, I love that. And something that you advocate in the book is mirroring. Can you share with the listeners what you mean by mirroring?
Yeah, and it's not the body language mirror. It's a very different definition of mirror. The hostage negotiator's mirror, the black swan mirror. Just repeating the last 1 to 3 words that somebody said, 1 to 3-ish. Could be one word. Could be, if you get north of 5, you're into paraphrasing, which is a different skill. It's a good skill. It's just a different skill. And people feel very heard, but they feel encouraged to go on. Like if you were to say something to me that I didn't completely understand, and I wanted to say, what do you mean by that? I could say, what do you mean by that? But you're most likely to say it again with the exact same words. Now, if I were to mirror what you just said, if you would have said, we deliver 6 weeks, we guarantee delivery 6 weeks after payment. And I might say 6 weeks after payment? upward inflection. And you might go, well, yeah, we're 6 weeks, but we say 6 weeks, but we get it a lot sooner than that regularly, because this is what we're going through. And you start going on and on and on. And so the mirroring is just this great encouraging sort of thing that even when you're holding back information, it pulls information out of people in a way that they feel drawn to and want to continue to talk. So the mirror skill is a really simplistic sounding, elegant skill that really gets people to expand.
Yeah. There was a stat that you cited in the book, which I found incredible, that waiters and waitresses who mirror their guests receive tips 70% more than those who don't. Just incredible.
How crazy is that, huh?
Just incredible. Is there any other, have you any other stats similar to that in terms of the powerful impact and efficacy of mirroring?
I don't have a specific stat. There was a guy that we ran across. My son Brandon and I were teaching a 2-day negotiation course, and of all places, a yoga retreat. Like, don't give me a yoga retreat, but we did. And as you might speculate, the attendees were largely women, although there were some men, and this man in particular. We were around him for a day and a half before we realized all he was doing was mirroring. And and I remember we were in a conversation with him for 45 minutes, and finally I realized this dude is doing nothing but mirroring. And on top of this, he looked happy as a clam. His wife looked completely annoyed. And we figured, what this guy did was he told his wife he was going to spend the entire 2 days only mirroring. That was all he was going to do. He wanted to show her how effective it was. And the insane part of it was all the women at the retreat kept coming up to her saying, your husband is so interesting. He's fascinating. You got to make sure you bring your husband every single time, because he's the most brilliant conversationalist. And she would just glare at him, and he'd smile because he knew that all he was doing was mirroring people, and they loved him.
Wow. So the perception is, even though he wasn't necessarily contributing to the conversation, he simply was repeating back to the other person what they just said. And our perception then is that these people are so engaged with me, which ultimately helps seed rapport.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Something that you referenced earlier, and you kind of glanced past it, but I want to come back to it for the benefit of our listeners, was this phrase, tactical empathy. Right. What is tactical empathy?
It's just the calibrated application of emotional intelligence. And what's it calibrated by? Well, we now know about neuroscience. And we know basically the limbic system, which is the emotional wiring of people's brains. As a layman, I will say it's 75% negative, largely negative. We know that from putting people, humanity, I'm not a neuroscientist, putting people in functional magnetic resonance imaging devices where we can watch electricity go through their brain. Humanity. And so we know that we're largely negative. And then we also know that simply by calling out the negatives, not by denying them, simply identifying them, which is what a label is, calling out a negative, that's the most effective way to get the negativity to disappear. They did an experiment. They put people in fMRIs. They showed them pictures that induced negative emotions. I don't know what the pictures were, but they induced negative emotions based on what they showed the people. They watched the electrical circuitry that's negative light up. And then they simply asked them to identify the emotion that they were feeling. They asked them to call it out, self-label, if you will. And every single time somebody self-labeled, the electrical activity in that part of the brain diminished every time. Now, the degree it diminished would change, but it had the same impact every time. So the important 2 millimeter shift here is you don't deny the negative. I don't want you to feel angry. You'd say, this is going to make you angry, or I have made you angry, or it sounds like I made you angry. Those are all different ways of identifying the anger versus denying it. The difference between also, I don't want you to think we're being greedy here with this price. The better way to say that, an extremely effective way, is to say, probably seems like we're being greedy with this price. When my company quotes prices, we tell people in advance, it's high. You know, let's not proceed under any belief that we are very expensive. And then I'll go dead silent and give the counterpart the option to go on. You appreciate being warned. You appreciate having the option. You appreciate that you choose whether or not to proceed. Our close rates are very high with that approach.
And should we call that out right at the outset? So if you think practically, and we would have been tendering for projects, and it was anything, these were multi-million-pound projects, anything from 6 months to 6 years could have been the lead time. So you were building rapport, seeking to build rapport during that entire time. We would deliver these budget quotations that could have ran up to 25 pages with the price at the end. So the aim was that you would step them through all of the benefits of the product and the value addition, and then we would get to the price. Are you suggesting, Chris, that a more impactful, effective way of negotiating is right up front, call out the elephant in the room, which is the price, and label it?
Well, and there's two parts to this, because there is a phrase, he or she who names price first loses.
Right.
Now, we prepare people for price, and there's a difference between preparing them for the price and giving them the price.
Right.
Now, I never want, I like being known as a straight shooter. If you get caught off guard, it ain't going to be over the price. And price never makes a deal. It does break deals. So understanding that, I mean, the delivery of the service really depends upon whether or not the price is a good price. What's the actual value of what you're delivering? So, but knowing that it could break the deal, I don't want to find out late that it's broken the deal, because I've wasted a massive amount of my time and gotten paid nothing for it. It's not a sin not to get the deal. It's a sin to take a long time not to get the deal. So the most likely aspect that's going to break this deal is going to be price. I'm going to warn you. You're never going to get caught off guard, ever.
Yeah.
And then when I warn you, and then you choose to go on, then you think of me as a straight shooter. You appreciate the fact that you're not caught off guard. A hidden dynamic of trust is predictability. If you take away the word trust and put in the word predictability, when I become extremely predictable, you trust me, because you never get caught off guard. So I know how emotional price can be. And that it could break the deal. I'm going to warn you. I'm going to give you the option. And if it's going to break the deal, I want to know sooner rather than later.
Yeah, brilliant. Would you advocate asking the question? So in that instance, and I'm putting my head back as you speak into some of the negotiations and thinking now how I would articulate the challenge around price. We were always the most expensive, the highest priced. Now we could in turn demonstrate the return on investment as a result of that price, but we were always going to be the highest priced.
Right.
But delivering the most value. Now, would you advocate articulating that we are going to be the highest priced? We can demonstrate the value, but I want to let you know that at the outset. And I also want to know if this fits within your budget, so that we are respectful of one another's time. And if it doesn't, then, thanks for inviting us. If not, then, we can continue to do the work that we need to do to present the value within that price. Would you ask the budget question?
I would leave the budget question out, because, they may have been given a budget based on some other factors. I mean, the budget question is a pretty common question. It's so common that as soon as you engage in a predictable form of dialogue, the other side's turning you off a little bit.
Yeah.
And you want to get into an honest conversation really about value.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we don't talk about budget. Like, you know, the real reality is if you're worth it and the value's there for them, they got the budget. So the budget almost becomes a distracting conversation.
Right. Right.
And so we almost never talk about budget. We always talk about value. And if somebody says the price is high, my response is, well, it sounds like the value is just not there for you. Now that automatically gets you into a conversation also a little bit away from the word value, because that's almost a cliche term. But when you say it sounds like the value is not there for you, they'll begin to define value for you. And they'll automatically trigger into that instead of getting into some cliche definition of value. You want to find out what's really going on with the other side, what really matters to the other side. Because there's a possibility you could still find a fit, but you got to understand what's valuable to them. And sometimes you got to say it in a way that triggers their thinking. What's valuable to you is a great what question, but it's hard for people to answer unless it's early in the morning and they got a lot of mental energy. Yeah. Like if you were to ask me in the middle of the afternoon what's valuable to you, I'd be like, I don't know, stop bothering me.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned something completely contrarian to everything that I've ever learned in the last 25 years, that we should be wary of the word yes and master the art of no. So again, please, Chris, share with our listeners what do you mean by mastering the art of no?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, what those words are is it's complete context. Like people think yes is success and they think that no is failure. And you talked before about, you can't get anybody in Brazil to say no. Well, it's when you're trying to get them to say yes. And so what people in Brazil, based on your description, will do is reject you.
Yeah.
So if you get out of the words yes and no entirely, then you started moving ahead to begin with. Like the Black Swan Group we're out of the yes business. I don't say, do you disagree? I'll say, do you disagree? I won't say, have you got a few minutes to talk? I'll say, is now a bad time to talk? All these cultures that supposedly won't say no, in point of fact, what they won't do is reject you. And then you begin to don't put them in a position where they got to reject you or say yes or no. Put them in a position where they're going to expand on their answers. Or the act of saying no is encouraging towards you. Do you disagree? No, I don't disagree, but here are the following problems. Is this a ridiculous idea? No, it's not a ridiculous idea, but here are the following problems. People are much more open because the commitment hook implied by yes is not there, or the rejection attack implied by no, that's not there either. So you're getting into a completely different emotional dynamic by not being afraid of the words and really understanding the context that they're being used.
Yeah, you mentioned that it gives the person that you're pitching to a sense that they're in control when you're leading them up that path where they're saying yes and yes and yes. It's overly predictable now, is the sense that they're all they sense this and become uncomfortable, whereas just allowing them to or asking questions to give them the opportunity, I suppose, to say no gives them that sense of control early on, and they will ultimately relax a little bit more and be more receptive to what you're saying. Is that fair?
Yeah, people feel safe and protected when they say no. Yeah, I mean, they feel it's a protective feeling to say no. So how do you construct it so that they feel safe and protected when they talk with you?
Something you mentioned within the book, and it's everyone listening will be able to relate to this, is the the sending the email out into the ether and getting no response. You know, you mention in the book about how we trigger a response to our emails. Can you share that?
Yeah, one line email, one line text message, just in a, if it's an email, just in a subject line, nothing else in a body unless you repeat this. Have you given up on this project? Have you given up on doing business with me? And I mean, it's got to go out exactly like that. And people respond. Three to 5 minutes of reading it, people respond. And that's the highest thing that we do. The response rate on that, the success rate on that is higher than anything else that we teach people. It's insane.
So you get the response, let's say, and they had been quiet for some time. Now they send the response back and say, well, yeah, the project's still alive, but we don't feel we've got the budget this year. It's likely going to be next year. What would you advise at that point?
Well, the last impression is a lasting impression. So you're constructing a last impression to lead to the next interaction. So my response to that would be, it's very generous for you to consider us at all. We would love to be a long-term provider for you, where 15 years from now, we look back at today and say, this was the day that started a highly profitable relationship. Because people want to be engaged with somebody who's looking out for them over the long term. And the mere fact that you're expressing long term, and you're no longer pitching, you're willing to let them move forward, knowing that you want to be on their side. Best chance of success, not a guarantee of success, but what's the best chance of success of winning business with them in the medium term? If they're telling you the truth right now, that it's not in their budget, if they're telling you the truth, then you've done the best you could possibly do to build a long-term relationship. Now, it's entirely possible that they're testing you over price. I mean, just because they don't necessarily want a discount doesn't mean they're going to take it. They won't accept it. So they want to see if you'll cut your price. They want to see if you'll drive the price down on who they're going to go with anyway. So that whole response that I gave you just now, when somebody said this ain't in our budget, there was no price cut in my response.
Yeah.
Do not cut your price. Over deliver, which makes your price a bargain, but do not cut your price.
Yeah.
And focus on long-term relationships. And people want to do business with somebody who wants to be in a long-term relationship.
This is a really good point. It's something we reference in our own book. Be careful of getting drawn into price negotiations, because if they ignore the value and bring you straight to price, then you're living in Las Vegas now. You'll be very aware of the Grand Canyon. We talk about you're on the margin killer canyon at that stage, and you've just jumped off it. You're going nowhere.
Yeah.
So how else should we conduct ourselves in those negotiations, those hard negotiations, to really maintain our price, Chris?
Well, I mean, other than, I don't want to sound like Nancy Reagan, just say no. But, there are enough people that value your service. I see businesses over and over and over again that you focus on the good customers and your business accelerates. There's a friend of mine, Joe Polish, runs an outfit called Genius at Work. He talks about halves and elves, and we use this term. An elf is easy, lucrative, and fun. A half is hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. And he says the L in half could be lucrative, hard, annoying, lucrative, and frustrating, which makes that blood money. But we adopted this strategy, and then, I talked before about the 7%ers. What do they do and what do they look like? Well, I told my sales team, all right, let's start developing the profile of what a half dozen says and what an elf dozen says. And you are under no obligation to make the deals with the halves. But let's start pulling some of our own behavior. Let's write this stuff down. Now let's start to track the amount of time that's involved. Now, my sales team came back to me and said, a half costs us anywhere from 2 to 5 times the amount of time. So if it's only twice the amount of time, we've just taken a 50% cut in pay. Now, on top of that, if they're hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating for us, we're hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating for them. What does that mean? What that means is it's not repeat business. So the difficult customers take us anywhere from 2 to 5 times as long, and we don't do repeat business. The good customers take half as long and they repeat, which is what causes the business to accelerate. So as soon as you start just looking for what these people look like, don't take my word for it. See how much time they cost you and then see whether or not they repeat business. That's why I think around the world, businesses and business people say, as soon as I started learning what to say no to, I started making more money. And I think it's a gut reaction of focusing on good customers because they repeat and they pay you full price.
Yeah. And it's so critically important that we create that in the marketing language, that avatar of what a good customer looks like, so we can identify them in the first instance. And once we create the capacity to receive good customers by filtering out the not so good, then ultimately what you're suggesting, Chris, and what I've seen in my own, my own experience, is that you actually make space for the good ones. So
yeah. And life is more enjoyable because they're not as painful to deal with.
Absolutely. Well, it's more enjoyable for them because they've wanted your services in the first instance, and it's much more enjoyable for you because they wanted it and they're getting the maximum value from it. So everyone wins in that instance. So something else in terms of the importance of our phraseology and the words that we use. You mentioned the 2 words that can transform any negotiation. That's right.
Yes.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, and it's really important to understand the distinction when somebody responds, you're right versus that's right. That's right. It was what people say when they believe that they've just heard what is the truth. And they're embracing it as the truth. They're not saying, I believe that's the truth, but that's what people are saying when they say that's right. Any leader that you like, any politician that you love, if you've heard them on TV, any speaker that you like, when they say something that you completely believe in, that you have complete faith in, you say, that's right. Yeah. Now, you're right, on the other hand, is what people say when they want you to stop talking. And, it's so nuts because until people know the distinction, people love to hear you're right. They feel good when they hear it, but they don't realize at the same time, the last time their spouse was bothering them about something they didn't want to do, they looked at the spouse and they said, you're right, just to get the spouse to shut up. Everybody does
it. That's definitely right. Brilliant.
So yeah, you gotta show somebody you understand where they're coming from, and you hear that's right. If you're pitching your value proposition to a customer who's getting ready to ghost you, I promise you, just before they ghosted you, they looked at you and said, you're right.
That's so powerful. I'm conscious of your time, and I'm want to be respectful of that. The last hour has absolutely flown. Before we get into the close, Chris, is there anything else that you would want to leave with our listeners who are aspiring to scale their businesses? And we know that any successful company who is successful in achieving scale will have effective negotiation at the heart of their their leadership and within the organization. So is there anything given the last hour that we've overlooked or missed out, or that you want to leave them with before we get into a close, when I ask you for 3 timeless takeaways?
Yeah, well, I mean, you negotiate when you're talking about time. I mean, everybody thinks they're in a negotiation just when they're talking about dollars. But dollars is a commodity that's only occasionally involved. Time is always involved. And you negotiate with your colleagues. You negotiate with your employees because you want a good relationship with them. You want them to follow your guidance. You want them to make them feel respected and heard. So wherever you are in your negotiation journey, and I'm going to do a shameless plug here. The website is blackswanltd.com, BLACKSWANLTD.com. And wherever you are in the negotiation journey, we've got material that can help you, that can help your employees. We want your employees to do a better job for you, which means we want them to negotiate with you so that you have a great long-term relationship. It's a two-way street, and everybody's more profitable and happier in what they do. So I would just ask that you open up your mind as to what a negotiation is. And if your purpose is to collaborate in a long-term trusted relationship, then learn as much as you possibly can about negotiation in general, and compare it to what you can learn from me and my company.
Brilliant. We'll put a reference to the website, and before we close, I'll get further details which we can include in our show notes, Chris. And of course, I encourage everyone to get this amazing book, Never Split the Difference: Negotiating as if your life depended on it. I have this book completely defaced, I have to say. For the listeners who are maybe listening to this as they're driving into the office this morning, and I always encourage everyone, if they've taken the time to listen, they've taken the last hour, can you leave them with something practical that they can do within their next interaction, within the next hour, where they interact with somebody, to begin practicing some of the tactics which you describe in your book? What one thing would you encourage them to do?
Try the mirror skill.
Right.
Just try, when you're listening to somebody, repeat the last 1 to 3 words of what they just said, or pick 1 to 3 words from something that intrigued you about what they said. Just practice it in a small stakes conversation. See what kind of reaction you get. Don't do it in a robotic voice. Tone of voice is really, curious. You said it was a tough day, whatever it is. Repeat it with a curious tone of voice, 1 to 3 words of what they just said, and see what kind of an impact that has on people.
Brilliant. I'm heading for a run with some people after this. I'm going to try it. So, Chris, I have really enjoyed the last hour. I want to thank you for your wisdom and for your energy. Before you leave us today, can you share with the listeners, given the richness, the vast richness of life experience you've had and with businesses, 3 timeless takeaways?
Well, really, the universe is largely on your side. You don't have to deal with everybody, but there's enough of the people that are out there that you should be dealing with, that if you focus on them, your life is really going to accelerate. Focus on the people that your core values line up with, and your life will accelerate.
Brilliant. Chris, what's next for you?
Well, we've got a book for real estate agents, residential real estate agents, coming out in about 6 months. And we got a follow-on book, Tactical Empathy Operations Manual, should be out in probably about a year.
Brilliant.
And then we continue to evolve our ideas and get better at what we're doing.
Brilliant. Well, look, I wish you all the very best with those, and I would love to have you back on whenever your book comes out on tactical empathy. You've mentioned Black Swan Limited. We'd put a link to the company in the show notes. Any other way people can get in touch with you, Chris? connect with
Well,
you?
really, we've got a newsletter that people can subscribe to by going to the website. Upper right hand corner of the site's a tab for the blog. If you sign up for the newsletter, we put training announcements. We train in person, different places. When we have new stuff that we want to announce, we'll put that out to the newsletter, and it's a concise and it's complimentary. So the newsletter is a great way to stay in touch.
Brilliant. Chris, once again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your wonderful wisdom and energy with us today on the show. I wish
You're
you
very
all the very
kind.
best.
Thank you for having me on. Very kind.
You're very welcome.